73 years on this earth, and my own flesh and blood thinks I'm nothing but a house-sitter with arthritic knees. I stared at Sarah's perfectly manicured fingernails as she patted my hand like I was some confused old dog. The living room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in as my 4 children sat arranged around me like judges at a tribunal. "Mom, you understand, don't you?" Sarah's voice dripped with that saccharine sweetness she'd perfected in her corporate climb. "Italy is so demanding. All that walking, the cobblestones, the stairs. You'd be miserable. Miserable." The word hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. I'd raised these 4 mostly alone after their father died when Sarah was barely 16. 2 jobs, night shifts at the diner, weekend cleaning houses. Every penny scraped together to send them to college, to give them the life I'd never had. Through chicken pox and broken hearts, failed tests and first loves, I'd been there. Always there. But Italy? The country I'd dreamed about since I was 8 years old. Reading about Roman ruins in the library while my mother worked late shifts? Suddenly I was too frail. "We just think you'd be more comfortable at home," David chimed in, adjusting his expensive watch. My eldest son, the lawyer. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "Someone needs to watch the house anyway," added Tom, my middle boy, the accountant who'd somehow forgotten to account for his mother's feelings. And Michael, my baby at 42, just stared at his shoes. He'd always been the sensitive one, but right now his sensitivity was remarkably absent. "Adult children only," Sarah continued, as if I hadn't been an adult when she was still in diapers. "It's really more of a business trip anyway. Boring meetings about Dad's old investments. You'd hate it. Business trip. Right. Because nothing says business like the family reunion they'd been planning for months, complete with tours of Tuscany and wine tastings in Rome." I smiled. The same smile I'd worn when they tracked mud through my clean kitchen, when they borrowed money they never paid back, when they forgot my birthday 3 years running. "Of course, dear. I understand completely." The relief on their faces was almost comical. They exchanged glances, probably congratulating themselves on handling the old lady so smoothly. After they left, I sat in the silence of my empty house. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, counting down the seconds of my apparently numbered days. Outside, Mrs. Henderson was trimming her roses, spry as ever at 78. Down the street, the Kowalskis were loading camping gear into their RV. They were both older than me. Too frail, my foot. I poured myself a glass of wine. The good stuff, not the cheap bottle I usually saved for special occasions. What was I saving it for, anyway? My funeral? The computer hummed to life in the study. I'd set up the family email account years ago, back when getting everyone coordinated for holidays required the patience of Job and the organizational skills of a military general. All their important stuff still came through it. Receipts, confirmations, anything involving the whole family. My fingers found the keyboard with surprising steadiness for someone supposedly too decrepit to navigate Italian cobblestones. 17 new messages. Most of them junk, but they're airline confirmations, hotel bookings, car rental agreements. All forwarded automatically to the family account, just like I'd set it up to do. My children so smart, so successful, so modern. And apparently so forgetful about the technology their old mother had taught them to use. I clicked on the first confirmation. Flight 447 to Rome, first class. Sarah always did like her luxury. Departure, next Tuesday. Return, the following Sunday. 7 glorious days in Italy. My Italy. I picked up the phone and dialed the airline's customer service number. The hold music was some tinny version of Vivaldi. How appropriate. "Hello, I need to make some changes to a reservation." The representative was helpful, patient with my questions. Yes, they could change the passenger name. Yes, the tickets were transferable. Yes, they could hold the new reservation with just a credit card. My credit card. The one I'd been using to secretly fund this little family adventure for the past 6 months, socking away money from my Social Security checks, my small pension. My children had no idea I'd been the one financing their dream vacation. It took 3 phone calls to rearrange everything. The hotels were surprisingly accommodating. Apparently, a confirmed reservation was a confirmed reservation, regardless of who showed up to claim it. The rental car company was equally obliging. By the time the sun set, Eleanor Richardson, widow, mother of 4, supposedly decrepit house-sitter, had a first-class ticket to Rome, a week at the Hotel Artemide, and a little red Fiat waiting for her at the airport. I raised my wine glass to the empty room. "Salute," I said, testing out my rusty Italian. The phone rang around 9. Sarah, probably calling to make sure I understood my house-sitting duties. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, voice steady as stone. Mom, I just wanted to go over a few things before we leave. The plants need watering every other day, and if anything happens with the furnace, don't you worry about a thing, dear. I'll take very good care of everything. And I would, starting with taking care of myself. After I hung up, I pulled out my old suitcase from the hall closet. It smelled like mothballs and memories, but it would do. I hadn't traveled anywhere in 15 years, not since Robert died, but some things you don't forget. Like how to pack light, how to roll clothes to save space, how to tuck your important documents in the zippered compartment where they'd stay safe, and how to plan a trip without telling anyone where you're going. The airport buzzed with early morning energy as I wheeled my suitcase through the terminal. My hands shook slightly, not from age, but from pure adrenaline. I hadn't felt this alive in years. Gate 23A. First class boarding in 20 minutes. I found a seat near the window and pulled out my phone. For missed calls from Sarah. I let it ring again as I watched planes taxi on the runway. Mom, something's wrong with our tickets. The airline says they've been canceled, but that's impossible. We're supposed to leave in 3 hours and... I answered on the 5th ring. Hello, dear. Mom, thank God. Listen, we have a crisis. Someone hacked our travel accounts or something. All our reservations are gone. The airline says the tickets were transferred, but that doesn't make any sense. We're at the airport and... Oh my, that sounds terrible. It is terrible. We've been planning this for months. The hotels, the tours, everything. David's on hold with customer service, but they're saying the earliest they can get us out is next Friday, and it'll cost 3 times as much. Mom, can you believe this? What kind of person steals someone's vacation? Through the gate window, I watched my plane pull up to the jetway. Beautiful thing, sleek and white, ready to carry me across the ocean to everything I'd ever dreamed of seeing. I'm sure it will all work out, sweetheart. How can you be so calm? This is a disaster. We might have to cancel the whole thing. All that money, all those plans. Now boarding first-class passengers for Flight 447 to Rome. I stood, gathering my purse and carry-on. My boarding pass crinkled in my suddenly steady fingers. Mom, are you there? I'm here, Sarah. Listen, I have to go. Something's come up. What could possibly come up? You're just watching the house. I smiled, walking toward the gate agent with her crisp uniform and welcoming smile. I'm going to Rome. The line went quiet. Then, what did you say? I said I'm going to Rome. My flight's boarding now. Your flight? Mom, what are you talking about? You don't have a flight. You can't just. But I could. I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent who smiled and said, Welcome aboard, Mrs. Richardson. Enjoy your trip to Italy. Mom! Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. Mom, this is insane. You can't travel alone. What if something happens? What if you get lost? What if I have the time of my life? I ended the call and turned off the phone. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, there was a first-class seat with my name on it, and 7 days of Italian sunshine waiting for me. The flight attendant offered me champagne before takeoff. Real champagne, not the cheap stuff. I accepted it with a smile. First time to Rome? She asked. First time anywhere in 15 years. Well then, she raised her own small glass in a toast. To new adventures. To new adventures, I agreed. As the plane lifted off, climbing through the clouds toward the sunrise, I thought about my children frantically trying to rebook their stolen vacation. They'd figure it out eventually. Sarah was nothing if not resourceful when she wanted something badly enough. But for now, for these precious few hours suspended between my old life and whatever waited for me in Rome, I was just Eleanor Richardson, international traveler. Not too old, not too frail, not anyone's house sitter. Just a woman finally going home to the dreams she'd deferred for far too long. The pilot announced we'd reached cruising altitude. Below us, the world spread out like a map of possibilities, and ahead of us lay the eternal city, ancient and patient, waiting to welcome one more wanderer to its storied streets. I closed my eyes and smiled. Italy, here I come. Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Revenge, my dear, is a dish best served with a side of airline customer service and a lifetime of accumulated frequent flyer miles. The Hotel Artemide was everything the website had promised and more. Marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, crystal chandeliers that cast rainbows across cream-colored walls, and a view of the Roman rooftops that made my heart skip like a schoolgirl's. The bellhop, a handsome young man who couldn't have been much older than my Michael, carried my single suitcase as if it weighed nothing and called me Signora, with genuine respect. "You're sweet, Signora Richardson," he said, opening the door to reveal a room larger than my entire downstairs back home. "The hotel manager asked me to inform you that anything you need, you have only to call." I tipped him generously and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment to catch my breath. Not from exertion. Despite what my children believed, I was in better shape than most people half my age, but from the sheer impossibility of it all. Eleanor Richardson, the woman who'd spent 15 years eating dinner alone and watching game shows, was standing in a luxury hotel in Rome. My phone buzzed. Another call from Sarah. I let it go to voicemail and instead walked to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtains to reveal the city sprawling beneath me. Somewhere out there were the Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps. All the places I'd dreamed about while washing dishes and folding laundry and being a good mother, a good wife, a good woman who put everyone else's dreams before her own. Well, those days were over. I unpacked methodically, hanging my clothes in the massive wardrobe and arranging my toiletries in the marble bathroom. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with bright eyes I hadn't seen in years. My silver hair caught the Italian sunlight streaming through the window, and for the first time in decades, I liked what I saw. The phone rang again. This time it was David. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Language, I almost said, the way I had when he was 12 and experimenting with curse words. Instead, I sat in the plush armchair by the window and watched people move like ants along the street below. "Hello, David. How are you, dear?" "How am I?" I'm standing in an airport in Philadelphia trying to figure out how our entire vacation just vanished into thin air. The airline says our tickets were transferred to someone else. The hotels say the same thing. Even the car rental. Someone stole our entire trip, Mom. Our entire vacation. That's terrible, sweetheart. Have you called the police? The police? His voice cracked like it had during his awkward teenage years. What are they going to do? It's not technically theft if the reservations were transferred legitimately. But that's impossible because none of us would have. He stopped. The silence stretched long enough for me to count 3 pigeons landing on the balcony across the street. "Mom!" His voice was different now. Quieter. The voice of my little boy who'd figured out it was me who'd been leaving cookies on his nightstand, not Santa. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm in Rome, dear." More silence. Then, "You're what?" "I'm in Rome. Beautiful city. You know, I think your father would have loved it here. He always talked about taking me to Italy someday, before the cancer." I let my voice trail off, the way it always did when I mentioned Robert. Some wounds never fully heal. They just learn to ache more quietly. "You're in Rome," David repeated, like he was trying to solve a calculus problem. "You're in Rome with our tickets." Technically, they were my tickets. I paid for them, after all. I could hear him breathing, could practically see him loosening his tie the way he did when he was trying to process something that didn't fit his orderly lawyer's mind. "You paid for them?" "Of course I did. Did you think vacation ferries were funding your Italian adventure? I've been saving for months, putting away a little from my Social Security, my pension. I wanted to surprise you all." That much was true, though the surprise hadn't exactly gone as planned. I thought we could all go together, make some beautiful memories. But we said, "Sarah said you were too old to travel, that you'd be more comfortable at home." Yes, she did say that. I watched a couple walking hand in hand below, the woman laughing at something the man whispered in her ear. So I decided to prove her wrong. "Mom, this is crazy. You can't just steal our vacation." "I didn't steal anything, David. I simply took the trip I paid for. The trip I've been dreaming about my entire life while I raised 4 children and worked myself to the bone to give you everything you wanted." My voice was steady, but there was steel in it now. The same steel that had gotten me through Robert's funeral, through raising teenagers alone, through countless nights wondering how I'd pay the bills and keep food on the table. "You want to know what's crazy?" I continued. "Crazy is spending 73 years putting everyone else first. Crazy is letting my own children treat me like I'm already dead and buried. Crazy is sitting at home watching other people live their lives while mine wastes away." "Mom, I'm not finished." The authority in my voice surprised even me. "For 40 years, I was Robert's wife. For 50 years, I was your mother. But before all of that, I was Eleanor, and Eleanor has some living to do." I hung up before he could respond and turned off the phone. The silence in the room was different from the silence in my house back home. This silence was full of possibility, pregnant with adventure. This silence was mine. The knock on my door came 20 minutes later. Room service, I thought, though I hadn't ordered anything. But when I opened it, a woman about my age stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed in a way that screamed European sophistication. "Mrs. Richardson? I am Francesca Romano, the hotel manager. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but your family has been calling quite frantically. They seem to be under the impression that you are here. How do you say, under duress?" I almost laughed. Of course they had. My children, so certain of their mother's helplessness, probably convinced the poor woman that I'd been kidnapped or had suffered some sort of mental breakdown. "I assure you, Signora Romano, I am here entirely of my own free will. In fact, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She studied me with shrewd dark eyes, the kind that had probably seen every sort of family drama played out in hotel lobbies over the years. "Your daughter, she says you have never traveled alone before. She is very worried." "My daughter is very controlling," I replied. "But I appreciate your concern. Perhaps we could speak in my room? I'd hate for other guests to be disturbed by my family's enthusiasm." Francesca stepped inside, her gaze taking in the untouched champagne bottle, the guidebooks I'd spread across the table, the careful way I'd arranged my things. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because her expression relaxed. "You know," she said, settling into the chair across from mine, "I have 4 children myself. 3 boys and a girl. They think because I am 68, I should spend my days knitting and watching television. And do you?" Her laugh was rich and musical. "I run this hotel, Mrs. Richardson. I speak 5 languages, I have a degree in art history, and last year I climbed Vesuvius just to prove I could. But to my children, I am simply an old woman who needs protecting." We looked at each other, 2 mothers who'd spent decades being defined by everyone except themselves. "So," Francesca continued, "what are your plans while you're in Rome?" I reached for one of the guidebooks, its pages already marked with everything I wanted to see. "Everything," I said. "I plan to do everything." Over the next hour, Francesca helped me refine my itinerary. She knew which restaurants served the best carbonara, which tours avoided the crushing crowds, which piazzas were most beautiful at sunset. She wrote everything down in her elegant script, occasionally pausing to answer her phone when my children called back, which they did repeatedly. "Signora Richardson is resting comfortably," she would tell them, winking at me. "Yes, she seems quite well. No, she does not appear to need medical attention. Perhaps you should give her some time to enjoy her vacation." By evening, my phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them while sipping wine on my balcony, watching the sun set over the ancient city. Sarah's messages grew increasingly frantic as the day wore on, evolving from confusion to anger to what almost sounded like panic. "Mom, please call me back. This isn't like you. I don't understand what's happening. Are you having some kind of episode? The family is worried sick. Please just come home and we'll talk about this. I'm booking the next flight to Rome. Don't go anywhere until I get there." That last one made me smile. Sarah, always trying to manage everyone around her, still believed she could swoop in and rescue her poor, confused mother from her own adventure. My phone rang again. This time it was Michael, my baby. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Mom." His voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, are you okay?" "Really okay." Michael had always been the most perceptive of my children, the one who actually listened when I spoke instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. "I'm more than okay, Michael. I'm happy. But you just disappeared. You stole Sarah's vacation and flew to Italy like some kind of, I don't know, international criminal. I borrowed a vacation I paid for and finally took the trip I've been dreaming about my entire life. There's a difference." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, you really paid for it? The whole thing? Every penny? I've been saving for almost a year, thinking we could all go together. Make some memories before." I didn't finish the sentence. "Before I'm too old, before I die, before you stick me in some nursing home and forget about me." "Before what, Mom?" "Before it's too late." Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Are you having a good time?" The question caught me off guard. Of all the things my children had asked me today, "Where are you? What's wrong with you? Why would you do this?" Michael was the first to ask if I was enjoying myself. "I'm having the most wonderful time," I said, and meant it completely. I had lunch at a little cafe near the Pantheon, and the waiter brought me extra bread because he said I reminded him of his grandmother. I I spent the afternoon in the Vatican museums, looking at art I've only seen in books. Tonight I'm going to walk to the Trevi Fountain and make a wish. What are you going to wish for? I looked out over the city, its lights beginning to twinkle like earthbound stars. Below me, Rome hummed with life, couples walking hand in hand, families sharing gelato, tourists snapping photos of everything, locals hurrying home from work. All of it happening whether I was there to see it or not. All of it continuing the way life continued, whether you participated or just watched from the sidelines. I'm going to wish that I remember what it feels like to be me again, I said. Not somebody's mother or somebody's widow or somebody's burden. Just me. Michael was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Mom. I'm here, sweetheart. I think maybe Sarah and David and Tom forgot who you were before you were our mom. My eyes filled with tears I hadn't expected. Maybe I forgot too. Well, he said, and I could hear him smiling. Sounds like you're remembering now. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony until the stars came out, planning tomorrow's adventures and thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who'd read voraciously, who'd dreamed of far-off places, who'd wanted to be a teacher before she became a wife and mother instead. The woman who'd gotten lost somewhere in 40 years of putting everyone else first. But she wasn't gone. She was just dormant, like a seed waiting for the right conditions to grow again. And Rome, with its ancient streets and timeless beauty, its respect for age and wisdom, felt like exactly the right soil for that seed to finally bloom. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Standing in the shadow of the Colosseum at sunrise, I realized I'd never felt younger in my life. The ancient amphitheater rose before me like a dream made stone, its weathered arches catching the first golden light of dawn. I'd risen early, unable to sleep through the excitement of my third day in Rome, and walked here through empty streets that still held the coolness of night. A few other early risers moved like ghosts through the ruins. A photographer capturing the perfect light, a jogger making his morning rounds, an elderly man feeding stray cats near the metro entrance. But I felt like I had the whole magnificent structure to myself, this monument to human ambition and creativity that had stood for nearly 2,000 years. How many people had walked where I was walking? How many had felt this same sense of awe, this connection to something larger than their small daily concerns? I pulled out my phone and took a selfie, something I'd never done in my life until this trip. Eleanor Richardson, International Woman of Mystery, with the Colosseum behind her. I almost sent it to my children, then thought better of it. Let them wonder what I was doing. Let them imagine their frail old mother lost and confused in a foreign city, while I stood here feeling more alive than I had in decades. The morning unfolded like a love letter written just for me. Coffee and cornetti at a tiny cafe where the barista called me Bella, and meant it. A leisurely stroll through the Roman Forum, where I could practically hear the echo of ancient voices. Lunch in Trastevere at a restaurant Francesca had recommended, where the owner's mother, a woman even older than me, emerged from the kitchen to personally oversee my meal. Americana? She asked, studying me with sharp eyes. Si, I replied, one of the handful of Italian words I'd mastered. She nodded approvingly and disappeared, returning with a plate of pasta that was clearly not on the menu. Famiglia recipe, she explained in broken English. For special guests. I was special. Here, in this ancient city that had seen empires rise and fall, I was special. Not because I was someone's mother or widow, but because I was a woman with stories to tell, experiences to share, life still left to live. The wine helped. Or maybe it was the atmosphere, the way the afternoon light filtered through grapevines overhead, the sound of laughter from other tables mixing with the distant hum of Vespas navigating narrow streets. Whatever it was, I found myself chatting with the couple at the next table, Marco and Isabella, celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. You travel alone? Isabella asked, her English accented but warm. I do, I said, surprising myself with how natural it sounded. Brava. Marco raised his wine glass. Very modern woman. Modern. Another word that had never been applied to me. Eleanor Richardson, modern woman. I liked the sound of it. It was while walking off lunch through the winding streets of Trastevere that I discovered the leather shop. Tucked between a bookstore and a gelateria, its window displayed handbags and belts arranged with an artist's eye for color and texture. The smell of leather and oil drifted through the open door, rich and warm. Inside, a man about my age worked at a wooden table, his hands moving with practiced precision as he stitched a seam. Silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, strong hands that spoke of decades of craftsmanship. He looked up when I entered, setting down his work with unhurried grace. "Buongiorno, signora." "Good afternoon," I replied. "Your work is beautiful." He smiled, lines crinkling around his eyes in a way that suggested he smiled often. "Grazie. You are American?" "Yes. Eleanor Richardson." I extended my hand, which he took in both of his. "Giuseppe Benedetti. Welcome to my shop, Eleanor Richardson." The way he said my name, with that musical Italian cadence, made it sound like poetry. When was the last time someone had said my name like that? Like it mattered, like it was worth savoring? "How long have you been working with leather?" I asked, genuinely curious. 45 years. My father, he teach me when I am 12. His father teach him. Very old tradition in my family. He showed me around the small shop, explaining his process, letting me feel the difference between various types of leather. His hands brushed mine as he guided me through the textures, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. That little flutter of attraction, that awareness of another person as more than just a friendly stranger. "You make everything here yourself?" "Si. Every piece." He picked up a purse from the display, running his fingers along its edges. "This one I finished yesterday. 3 weeks to make start to finish. It's gorgeous." And it was deep burgundy leather soft as silk, with brass hardware that caught the light. The kind of purse I'd admired in store windows my whole life, but never bought for myself. "For you," he said suddenly, pressing it into my hands. "Gift." "Oh no, I couldn't." "Please." His eyes were serious now. "Is not often I meet women who appreciate the work, the craft. Most people they want fast, cheap, made by machines. You understand the beauty of things made by hand." I stared down at the purse, feeling its weight, its quality. When was the last time someone had given me something just because they wanted to? Not because it was my birthday or Christmas or Mother's Day, but simply because they thought I deserved something beautiful? "Thank you," I whispered, meaning it more than he could possibly know. "You come back tomorrow? I show you more of my work. Maybe we have coffee." Was he asking me on a date? At 73? The thought should have been ridiculous, but looking into his warm brown eyes, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I'd like that very much." I floated back to the hotel, Giuseppe's purse tucked under my arm like a trophy. Francesca was at the front desk and smiled when she saw me. "Good day, Mrs. Richardson." "Wonderful day. Thank you for the restaurant recommendation in Trastevere. And I may have met someone." I felt myself blushing like a teenager. "Ah!" Francesca's eyes lit up with delight. "Romance in Rome. There is nothing more beautiful. Tell me everything." I found myself spilling the whole story over wine in the hotel bar, Giuseppe's shop, his gift, the way he'd said my name like it was something precious. Francesca listened with the enthusiasm of a woman who understood exactly what it meant to feel seen again. "Giuseppe Benedetti," she mused. "I know this name. Very respected craftsman. Lost his wife maybe 10 years ago. Good man, very good reputation. A widower. Like me. Someone who understood loss, who knew what it meant to rebuild a life after the person you'd planned to grow old with was gone. But enough about me," I said, suddenly embarrassed by how much I'd revealed. "How are my children handling my disappearance?" Francesca's expression grew more cautious. "They call many times today. Your daughter, she is very insistent. She wants to speak with hotel security, with the police, with anyone who will listen. She seems to believe you are in danger. The only danger I'm in is having too good a time. Your son David, he asks if we can monitor your activities. I tell him we are hotel, not prison. But Mrs. Richardson." She hesitated. "They say they are coming to Rome. To bring you home." My stomach dropped. "When?" "Tomorrow. Early flight." So my children, who deemed me too frail to travel, were now crossing an ocean to rescue me from my own adventure. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so frustrating. "Let them come," I said, surprised by my own resolve. "I'm not ready to go home." That evening, I walked to the Trevi Fountain as planned, navigating the crowds of tourists taking selfies and tossing coins into the illuminated water. I'd brought 3 coins. One for luck, one for love, one for the courage to keep being the woman I was rediscovering myself to be. The fountain was even more magnificent at night, its Baroque figures seemingly alive in the play of light and shadow. I closed my eyes, made my wishes, and tossed my coins over my shoulder into the swirling water. When I opened my eyes, my phone was ringing. "Michael." "Hi, sweetheart." "Mom." His voice was strained, tight with worry. "Mom, we need to talk." "What's wrong? You sound upset." "Sarah's in the hospital." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around me, tourists continued their chatter and photo-taking, but the sound seemed to fade to a distant hum. "What happened?" "She had a panic attack this afternoon. Started when she realized you'd actually taken their vacation, but it got worse when she couldn't reach you. She hyperventilated, her heart rate went through the roof. They had to take her to the ER. Guilt crashed over me like one of those Roman taxis speeding through narrow streets. Sarah, for all her controlling ways, was still my daughter. Still the little girl who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried in my arms when boys broke her heart. "Is she okay now?" "Physically, yes. But Mom, she's convinced something terrible has happened to you. She keeps saying you'd never do something like this on your own, that someone must have convinced you or tricked you somehow. She's talking about having you declared incompetent." The fountain spray misted my face, or maybe those were tears. I wasn't sure anymore. "She can't do that. I'm perfectly competent." "I know that. But she's scared, Mom. We're all scared. This isn't like you." "Maybe it should be like me," I said quietly. "Maybe this is who I was meant to be all along, before life got in the way." But running off to Italy without telling anyone, stealing Sarah's vacation. I didn't steal anything, Michael. I took a trip I paid for myself. There's a difference. Sarah doesn't see it that way. None of them do. They think you're having some kind of breakdown. I looked up at the fountain's central figure, Neptune commanding his horses through treacherous waters. Strong, determined, unafraid of the chaos around him. "What do you think, Michael?" He was quiet for a long moment. I think maybe you're the sanest you've been in years. But that doesn't mean the others are going to see it that way. Your sister's coming to Rome tomorrow." "I know. David and Tom too. They're all coming to bring you home. And you?" "I'm staying here to keep an eye on Sarah. Someone needs to, and I figured." He paused. "I figured maybe you deserve to finish your adventure before they drag you back to reality." My youngest child, understanding me better than I'd dared to hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "Mom, just be careful, okay? Not because you're old or frail or any of that garbage they keep saying, but because I love you, and I want you to come home safe when you're ready." After we hung up, I stood by the fountain for another hour, watching coins glitter in the underwater lights, watching people make wishes and walk away believing in magic. Rome did that to you. Made you believe in possibilities, in transformation, in the idea that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. But transformation, I was learning, came with a price. Change upset people, especially when they'd grown comfortable with your limitations. My children had spent decades knowing exactly who I was. Reliable Eleanor, predictable Eleanor who would always be there to watch the house and ask no questions. This new Eleanor, this woman who stole vacations and charmed Italian craftsmen and stood confident in the shadow of ancient monuments. She threatened everything they thought they knew about their mother. And scared people, I'd learned over the years, often reacted badly. Tomorrow would bring my children and their rescue mission. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, explanation, probably more tears and accusations. But tonight, I was still just Eleanor Richardson, international woman of mystery, making wishes by a Roman fountain and planning to have coffee with a handsome widower who thought I was worth a beautiful purse. Tonight, that was enough. I walked back to the hotel through streets that hummed with life, past restaurants where families shared long meals, past couples walking hand in hand, past ancient churches where candles flickered in the darkness like prayers made visible. Rome had embraced me like a long-lost lover, just as I'd imagined, and I wasn't ready to let go. But as I fell asleep in my luxurious hotel bed, Giuseppe's purse on the nightstand and my phone showing 17 new missed calls, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah in a hospital bed, hyperventilating over her mother's rebellion. Had my revenge gone too far? Or was this simply the price of finally living my own life? I supposed I'd find out tomorrow. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Sometimes you have to cross an ocean to discover the secrets your own children have been hiding in your backyard. I woke to pounding on my hotel room door, and the sound of my daughter's voice cutting through the Roman morning like a buzz saw through silk. "Mom, open this door right now." The bedside clock read 7:23 a.m. Sarah must have taken the red-eye flight and come straight from the airport. I sat up slowly, Giuseppe's leather purse catching the morning light from my nightstand, a tangible reminder that yesterday hadn't been a dream. "Mom, we know you're in there." The front desk confirmed it. More pounding. David's voice now deeper but equally demanding. "This has gone far enough. We're taking you home." I pulled on my robe and padded to the door, pausing with my hand on the lock. Through the peephole, I could see 3 faces that looked like variations of my own. Sarah's sharp features tightened with worry and anger, David's familiar lawyer mask barely concealing his frustration, and Tom's accountant's precision evident even in his rumpled travel clothes. My children. The people I'd given my life to raise, educate, and launch into the world. Standing outside my door like an intervention team. One moment, I called and went to brush my teeth first. Let them wait. I'd waited 73 years to live my life. They could wait 5 minutes. When I finally opened the door, Sarah pushed past me before I could speak, her eyes scanning the room like a crime scene investigator. David and Tom followed more cautiously, but with the same underlying assumption that I was no longer capable of making my own decisions. "Thank God you're safe," Sarah said, though her tone suggested relief mixed with exasperation. "Do you have any idea how worried we've been? How irresponsible this whole stunt has been? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Did you have a nice flight?" She whirled around, designer handbag clutched like a weapon. Even after international travel, Sarah managed to look perfectly put together. Not a hair out of place, makeup flawless. It was a skill I'd never mastered and secretly admired. "Don't you good morning me, mother. You stole our vacation, disappeared without a word, and left us all thinking you'd been kidnapped or worse. I told you where I was going. You hung up on me. After I told you I was going to Rome. The listening part was up to you." David stepped forward, using his courtroom voice. "Mom, we need to talk. Seriously. This behavior is completely out of character for you. Maybe the problem isn't my behavior. Maybe the problem is that you don't know my character as well as you think you do." I moved to the window, looking out at the Roman morning. Street vendors were setting up their stalls, early commuters hurried past with espresso cups, and somewhere in the distance, Giuseppe was probably opening his leather shop, preparing for another day of creating beautiful things with his hands. "We know you're upset about the Italy trip," Tom said, his accountant's mind already calculating damage control. "But this isn't the way to handle it. We can plan another vacation, all of us together. Somewhere more suitable." "Suitable for whom?" "For someone your age, Mom. Somewhere with better medical facilities, easier transportation, fewer stairs." "I climbed every step to the top of St. Peter's Dome yesterday," I interrupted. "All 551 of them. My knees are fine, my heart is strong, and the only thing deteriorating around here is your respect for your mother." Sarah's face flushed red. "You climbed 551 steps? Are you insane? What if you'd fallen? What if you'd had a heart attack? Who would have known how to contact us?" "The same people who knew how to contact you when you had your panic attack and ended up in the hospital." That stopped her short. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the distant sound of Roman traffic and the grandfather clock's steady tick. Except there was no grandfather clock here, just the memory of its rhythm from my real life back home. "That's different," she said finally. "I was stressed because my mother had apparently lost her mind and stolen my vacation." "Sarah." David's warning tone suggested this wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation since yesterday. "What? It's true. This whole thing is." She gestured wildly around the room. "It's not normal, David. Mom doesn't do things like this. She doesn't travel alone, she doesn't make impulsive decisions, she doesn't." She stopped, as if realizing she was about to say something she couldn't take back. "She doesn't what, Sarah?" My voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "She doesn't act like this." "Like what?" "Like a person with her own wants and desires? Like someone capable of making her own choices? Like someone who's..." She looked at her brothers for support. "Who's having some kind of episode." The word hung in the air like incense in a cathedral. Heavy, choking, impossible to ignore. "An episode." I repeated it slowly, tasting its implications. "That's what you think this is?" "Mom," Tom said carefully, "you have to admit this is very sudden. Very unlike you. Maybe we should have you looked at by a doctor, just to be safe." "I've already been looked at by a doctor. Dr. Patricia Wells gave me a clean bill of health 6 months ago. Perfect blood pressure, excellent cognitive function, bone density better than most women 20 years younger." 6 months ago? David's lawyer instincts kicked in. "Why were you seeing a doctor 6 months ago?" I'd walked right into that one. But maybe it was time they knew. Because I wanted to make sure I was healthy enough to travel. Because I've been planning this trip for over a year. Because I knew you'd try to stop me if you found out. The silence that followed was different from the earlier tension. This was the silence of puzzle pieces clicking into place, of children realizing their mother wasn't quite as simple as they'd assumed. You've been planning this for a year? Sarah's voice was smaller now, confused. Longer, actually. Ever since your father died, I've been making lists of things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see. Italy was always at the top. But you never said anything. When would I have said something, Sarah? Between listening to you complain about your job, helping Tom with his divorce papers, babysitting David's kids, or managing your father's estate. When exactly was I supposed to mention that Eleanor Richardson might have dreams of her own? My phone buzzed with a text message. Giuseppe, probably wondering if I was still coming for coffee. The thought of his kind eyes and gentle hands steadied me. Who's texting you? Sarah demanded, and I realized I'd smiled without meaning to. A friend. What friend? You don't have friends in Rome. You don't know anyone in Rome. I do now. She grabbed for my phone, but I was quicker than she expected. 73 years of reflexes honed by decades of keeping things away from grabbing children served me well. Mother, give me that phone. Absolutely not. I need to see who you're talking to. What if someone's taking advantage of you? What if you're being scammed? What if I'm finally living my life? The pounding on the door started again, but this time it was accompanied by Francesca's voice. Mrs. Richardson? Is everything all right in there? I opened the door to find the hotel manager looking concerned, flanked by 2 security guards in crisp uniforms. I'm fine, Francesca. Just having a family discussion. She looked past me at my children, her expression cooling noticeably. We have had some complaints about noise. Perhaps this conversation could continue somewhere more private. Of course, David said, slipping into his professional charm mode. We're just concerned about our mother. She's been acting very strangely lately. Francesca's eyebrows rose slightly. Strangely how? Well, for starters, she's here. Alone. Our mother doesn't travel. I see. Francesca's tone could have frozen the Tiber. And you are? Her children. We're here to take her home. I see, she repeated. Mrs. Richardson, do you wish to go home with these people? The question caught everyone off guard. In all their planning and scheming and rescuing, it apparently hadn't occurred to my children that someone might actually ask what I wanted. Not yet, I said. I have plans today. Plans? Sarah's voice cracked. What kind of plans? I'm having coffee with Giuseppe, then we're going to see the Capitoline museums. Tonight there's a concert at the Baths of Caracalla. Giuseppe. David's lawyer antenna was fully extended now. Who is Giuseppe? A gentleman I met yesterday. A widower. He makes beautiful leather goods and has lovely manners. A man. Sarah looked like she might faint again. You met a strange man and you're going out with him? Mom, you could be robbed, kidnapped, murdered. Or I could have a pleasant afternoon with someone who enjoys my company. Francesca stepped forward. Perhaps I could suggest the hotel restaurant for your family discussion? It is more comfortable, and you will not disturb other guests. An hour later, we sat around a table in the hotel's elegant dining room, espresso and pastries growing cold between us as my children took turns explaining why I needed to come home immediately. The house is sitting empty, Tom said. Anything could happen. Mrs. Henderson is keeping an eye on things. She's more reliable than a security system. What about your medications? Sarah asked. I don't take any medications. Haven't for years. Your doctor's appointments? I don't have any scheduled for 2 weeks. What about? David started then stopped. What about what, David? He exchanged glances with his siblings. Sarah nodded slightly. Mom, we need to tell you something. The reason we didn't want you to come on this trip, it wasn't really a vacation. My stomach dropped, though I kept my expression neutral. What was it? We had meetings scheduled. Legal meetings. About your future. My future. Tom leaned forward, his accountant's precision evident in every word. We've been concerned about you living alone in that big house. About what would happen if you fell or got sick or, well, started showing signs of dementia. I see. There's a beautiful place about 20 minutes from Sarah, David continued. Sunset Manor. It's not like those awful nursing homes you hear about. It's more like a resort. 3 meals a day, activities, medical staff on site. And you were going to arrange this without consulting me. We were going to talk to you when we got back, Sarah said quickly. Get all the information first, make sure it was the right fit. And my house. More silence. Finally, Tom spoke. The house is too big for one person, Mom. Too much maintenance, too much upkeep. If we sold it, the money could pay for your care at Sunset Manor for years, maybe even decades. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. Around us, other hotel guests continued their breakfasts, their conversations, their lives. Normal people having normal mornings, while my world tilted sideways. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I need some air." I walked out of the hotel and kept walking, through narrow Roman streets that had seen countless family dramas play out over the centuries. My children's voices called after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Not yet. Giuseppe's shop was open, the familiar smell of leather and oil greeting me like an embrace. He looked up from his workbench and immediately set down his tools. "Eleanor, you look upset." I collapsed into the chair beside his workbench and told him everything. About my children's rescue mission, about their plan to put me in a nursing home, about how they'd used my own money to plan a trip that was really a conspiracy against my independence. Giuseppe listened without interrupting, his hands still except for the occasional touch on my arm or shoulder. When I finished, tears were streaming down my face. "I'm sorry," I said. "This is not how I wanted our coffee date to go." "Cara mia," he said softly, pulling his chair closer. "You have nothing to be sorry for." He held me while I cried, this gentle man who barely knew me, but somehow understood that I needed to be seen as more than just someone's mother, someone's problem to be solved. In his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the smell of fine leather, I felt more valued than I had in my own family's presence. "What will you do?" he asked when my tears finally stopped. I pulled back and looked at him, this kind stranger who'd offered me friendship and possibly more. "I don't know. But I know I'm not ready to go home yet." "Then don't. It's not that simple. They're my children. If they really think I'm incompetent." "Are you?" "No." "Then prove it." I wiped my eyes with the handkerchief he offered. Real cloth, not paper, embroidered with his initials in one corner. "How?" "By living your life. By being the woman I met yesterday, strong, independent, making her own choices." I thought about my children, probably still sitting in that restaurant, planning their next move. They underestimated me in so many ways, but they'd made one critical mistake. "Giuseppe," I said slowly, "how would you feel about helping me with a little project?" "What kind of project?" I smiled, feeling that familiar steel returning to my spine. "The kind that proves to my children that their mother is far from helpless." Because here's what my children didn't know. I hadn't just been planning this trip for a year. I'd been documenting their conspiracy for months. Every phone call where they discussed my deteriorating condition. Every email about Sunset Manor. Every financial document they'd requested copies of just in case. I had recordings. I had screenshots. I had enough evidence to prove that far from being incompetent, I was the only one in the family who'd seen this coming. And if they wanted to play legal games with my life, they were about to discover that their apparently helpless mother had learned a few tricks during 40 years of marriage to their father. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Home is where the heart is, but sometimes you have to travel halfway around the world to remember where you left yours. 3 weeks later, I stood in my own driveway, Giuseppe's leather purse slung over my shoulder and a tan that spoke of Roman sunshine still glowing on my skin. The house looked smaller somehow, as if my week in Italy had shifted my perspective on what constituted the boundaries of my world. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her garden gate before I'd even reached my front door, pruning shears in hand and curiosity written all over her weathered face. "Eleanor, thank goodness you're back safe and sound. Your children have been beside themselves with worry." "I'll bet they have," I thought, but smiled at my neighbor instead. "Hello, Patricia. How are the roses?" "Blooming beautifully, thanks to this warm weather. But where on earth have you been?" "Sarah came by twice asking if I'd heard from you, looking like she hadn't slept in days." "I took a little trip to Rome." Patricia's eyebrows shot up toward her silver hairline. "Rome? As in Italy? By yourself?" "By myself," I confirmed, enjoying the shock on her face. Patricia Henderson had known me for 15 years, had watched me become smaller and quieter after Robert died, had probably written me off as just another widow marking time until the inevitable. "Well, I never," she said, then caught herself. "I mean, good for you, Eleanor. You look wonderful. Absolutely radiant." I did feel radiant. The woman who'd left this house 3 weeks ago had been someone's mother, someone's widow, someone's burden. The woman who'd returned was simply Eleanor Richardson, and that felt like a revelation worth celebrating. My key still fit the lock, though part of me had wondered if my children might have changed it in my absence. The house smelled faintly of dust and silence, but also of the lavender sachets I kept in the linen closet and the lemon oil I used on the hardwood floors. It smelled like home, but not like a prison. I'd barely set my suitcase down when I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the front window, I watched all 4 of my children emerge from 2 separate vehicles, moving with the grim determination of a military operation. Sarah reached the door first, her key already in hand. She stopped short when she found it unlocked. "Mom!" "In here, sweetheart." They filed into my living room like a delegation arriving for peace talks, their faces a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and barely contained frustration. Sarah looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks, her usually perfect composure frayed around the edges. David carried a briefcase, because of course he did. Tom clutched a folder that probably contained printouts of my supposed incompetence. And Michael just looked sad. "Thank God you're home," Sarah said, dropping into the armchair she'd always favored. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" I settled into my own chair, the one by the window where I'd spent so many quiet evenings reading or watching the world go by. It felt different now, less like a place of exile, and more like a chosen vantage point. "I imagine it's been difficult," I said. "Would anyone like tea?" The question seemed to throw them off balance. They'd clearly prepared for battle, and I was offering refreshments. "Tea," David repeated. "Mom, we need to talk. Seriously, talk. We can talk over tea." I brought back some lovely Earl Grey from Harrods. A small lie, but it would give me a few minutes to gather my thoughts. In the kitchen, I arranged cups on the good china tray, the one I'd inherited from my mother and used maybe 6 times in 40 years. If not now, when? The kettle's whistle provided a soundtrack for the urgent murmur of voices from the living room. My children strategizing, no doubt, about how to handle their suddenly unpredictable mother. When I returned with the tea service, they fell silent. I poured 4 cups with steady hands, added milk and sugar as each preferred, and passed them around like I was hosting a church social instead of a family intervention. "Now then," I said, settling back with my own cup. "What did you want to discuss?" Sarah leaned forward, her teacup untouched. "Mom, what you did in Rome was completely irresponsible. Disappearing like that, refusing to come home when we asked, gallivanting around a foreign city with some stranger. Giuseppe is hardly a stranger anymore." "Giuseppe." She said his name like it tasted bitter. "This Italian man you've known for all of 5 minutes. Actually, we spent quite a bit of time together those last 2 weeks. He's a remarkable person. 69 years old, widowed for 8 years, has 3 children and 7 grandchildren who adore him. He speaks 4 languages, plays the violin, and makes the most exquisite leather goods I've ever seen." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Tom spoke. "Mom, you've known this man for less than a month. Don't you think you're moving a little fast?" "Fast?" I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. "Thomas, I'm 73 years old. At my age, what exactly am I supposed to be moving slowly toward? The grave? That's not what I meant. Isn't it?" I set down my teacup and looked at each of my children in turn. "For the past 15 years, you've all treated me like I was already half dead. Too old to travel, too frail to make my own decisions, too set in my ways to change. Well, I have news for you. I'm not dead yet, and I'm not planning to start acting like it." David cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. "Mom, we're concerned about your judgment. The impulsive trip, this man you've gotten involved with so quickly, the way you've been acting. The way I've been acting is like a woman who's finally remembered she has a life worth living. But the decisions you're making don't seem like you," Sarah insisted. "The mother we know would never do something so reckless." I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where photos of my family shared space with mementos from happier times. Robert's college graduation, the children's weddings, grandchildren's birthday parties. A whole life lived for other people. The mother, you know, I said quietly, never had the chance to be anything else. I pulled a manila folder from behind Robert's picture, where I'd hidden it before leaving for Rome. My insurance policy, carefully assembled over months of growing suspicion about my children's intentions. "But since we're discussing judgment and decision-making," I continued, returning to my chair, "perhaps we should talk about yours." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is a printout of an email exchange between Sarah and David from 6 months ago. David writes, "Mom's definitely showing signs of cognitive decline. Yesterday she forgot where she put her reading glasses." Sarah responds, "I know. And she's been repeating stories more often." Maybe it's time to start looking into our options. Sarah's face went white. Mom, how did you? This one's interesting too. I pulled out another sheet. Tom, writing to all of you. I've been reviewing Mom's finances. If we sell the house and liquidate her investments, there should be enough to cover a nice assisted living place for at least 10 years. David's response. Sunset Manor has a good reputation and they're only 20 minutes from Sarah. Perfect solution. The silence in the room was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down seconds that felt like hours. And this, I said, pulling out my phone and scrolling to a saved recording, is my personal favorite. Sarah's voice filled the room, tinny but clear through the phone's speaker. She'll fight us on the nursing home thing, but once we're in Italy, we can finalize everything. By the time we get back, it'll be a done deal. She'll have to accept it. I stopped the recording and looked at my children's stricken faces. Did you really think I was so far gone that I wouldn't notice when my own family was plotting against me? Mom, Michael said quietly, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. We weren't plotting. We were worried. Worried enough to plan my imprisonment without my knowledge or consent. It's not imprisonment, David protested. Sunset Manor is a beautiful facility. I've been there, David. I toured it myself 3 months ago, after I found the first brochure you left here. It's a lovely prison, I'll give you that, but it's still a prison. Clean, well-staffed, filled with people waiting to die. I pulled out one final document, a bank statement I'd printed before leaving for Rome. But here's the part that really stings, I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. This shows the transfers from my accounts over the past year. The money you thought you were borrowing for your Italian vacation? The money I've been secretly funneling to you because I wanted to surprise you with a family trip? I watched understanding dawn on their faces, followed quickly by shame. Every penny of that vacation came from my accounts. My Social Security checks, my pension, the small inheritance from my sister. I've been saving for over a year, dreaming of taking my family to the country I'd always wanted to visit. And you used my own money to plan my exile. Sarah started crying first, quiet tears that she tried to hide behind her hands. Tom stared at the floor. David closed his briefcase with shaking fingers. I trusted you, I continued. I raised you to be better than this. I sacrificed everything, my career, my dreams, my identity, to give you the lives you wanted. And this is how you repay me. By deciding I'm too inconvenient to keep around. Mom, we never meant, Sarah started. Yes, you did. You meant exactly what you planned. You just never expected me to find out. I gathered the documents and returned them to the folder, my movements deliberate and calm. Now, here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to earn back my trust, but it's going to take time and genuine change in how you treat me. I'm not an invalid, I'm not incompetent, and I'm not your problem to solve. I'm your mother, and I deserve your respect. Of course, David said quickly. We never meant to disrespect. Actions, David. Not words. I want to see changes in how you interact with me, how you include me in decisions that affect my life, how you speak to me and about me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd lived for 30 years. Mrs. Henderson was still working in her garden, probably straining to overhear whatever drama was unfolding next door. I'm keeping this house, I said firmly. I'm keeping my independence. And I'm keeping my right to make my own choices about my life, my money, and my future. What about Giuseppe? Tom asked quietly. I smiled, feeling the warmth that always came when I thought of the gentle man who'd shown me kindness when my own family was plotting against me. Giuseppe is flying here next month to visit. He wants to see where I live, meet my family, experience American culture. After that, I'll be returning to Rome for an extended stay. Apparently, his children are much more welcoming to their father's new friend than mine are to their mother's. You're going back? Sarah's voice was small, defeated. I'm going back and forward, and anywhere else I choose to go. Giuseppe has invited me to spend Christmas with his family. I've always wanted to see Rome during the holidays. I turned back to face them, these 4 people who'd shaped my life for so many years. I love you all. I always will. But I'm done living my life according to your expectations and limitations. I'm done being the quiet widow in the corner, grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. Michael looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. What can we do to fix this, Mom? Start by seeing me, I said simply. Not as your burden or your obligation, but as Eleanor Richardson. A woman with her own dreams, her own desires, her own right to happiness. Over the next hour, We talked more honestly than we had in years. Sarah apologized through tears that seemed genuine. David admitted he'd let his lawyer's instincts override his son's heart. Tom promised to respect my financial independence. And Michael? Michael just held my hand and said he was proud of me. They left eventually, promising to do better, to be better. Whether they'd keep those promises remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I felt like we'd had a real conversation instead of a management meeting about my care. After they were gone, I called Giuseppe. It was evening in Rome, and I could picture him in his little apartment above the shop, probably reading with a glass of wine and opera playing softly in the background. "Ciao, Bella," he said when he heard my voice, and I smiled at the warmth in his tone. "I'm home," I told him. And I told them everything. Everything. About you, about Rome, about the woman I discovered in your shop and on those ancient streets. About the fact that I'm not ready to disappear just because they think I should. And how did they respond? Like children who'd been caught misbehaving. But maybe like children who might finally be ready to grow up. We talked for an hour about his upcoming visit, about the places I wanted to show him, about the life we might build together between two countries and two very different worlds. When we finally said goodbye, I felt lighter than I had in years. I made myself dinner, real dinner, not the sad single-serving meals I'd been surviving on, and ate it at the dining room table with candles lit and music playing. Outside, the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd raised my children and buried my husband and nearly lost myself. But I wasn't lost anymore. I'd found my way home, not just to this house but to the woman I'd been before life convinced me to be smaller, quieter, less demanding of joy. My passport sat on the counter, no longer forgotten in a drawer, but ready for the next adventure. Giuseppe's letters were filed carefully in my desk, along with the train tickets for our planned trip to Florence and the restaurant recommendations from Francesca. At 73, I was finally learning to live instead of just existing. And if my children had learned anything from this whole experience, maybe they'd realize that age brings wisdom, not weakness, and that underestimating your elders is a dangerous game indeed. As for me, well, let's just say this grandma's passport is never going to collect dust again. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to know the country in which you are listening to this story. Which country is that? Please comment below.